everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. Tonight's Parent Speaker Series is brought to you through a collaboration between Newburyport Youth Services, the River Valley Charter School Parent Alliance, and the Newburyport PTO. For those of you who don't know, I'm Trish Boateng. I'm a licensed social worker for Newburyport Youth Services, and I'm going to pass the microphone over to Mary Ann.
Hi, good evening. My name is Mary Ann Gasparo. I'm actually a teacher at the Bresnahan School and the Newburyport PTO rep for the Parents Speaker Series, and also for our rep for River Valley Charter School. If you want to give away, Brian for River Valley Charter. So tonight we have Dr. Michael Thompson speaking. Dr. Michael Thompson is a consultant, author, and psychologist specializing in children and families. He is the supervising psychologist for the Nock Middle School and has worked in more than 700 schools across the United States, as well as in international schools in Central America, Europe, Africa, and Asia. A dedicated speaker and traveler, Dr. Thompson has appeared on a number of well-known shows, including The Today Show, Oprah Winfrey, 2020, 60 Minutes, The Early Show, and Good Morning America. He's been quoted in the New York Times, the Washington Post, Newsweek, Time, and U.S. News and World Report, and has been a guest on NPR's Morning Edition, Talk of the Nation, and The Diane Rim Show. He wrote, narrated, and hosted a 2-hour PBS documentary entitled Raising Cain that was broadcasted nationally in 2006. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of that. So tonight, Dr. Thompson is going to speak about the pressured child and adolescent and helping your young person to achieve in school, college, and in life. We're incredibly lucky to have Dr. Thompson, an expert here in Newburyport, so we welcome Dr. Michael Thompson.
I'm delighted to be back in Newburyport. I spoke here some years ago, maybe 6 or 7. In the years before the pandemic, remember that? It's very hard to say how long ago that was, but I'm delighted to be back with all of you, and I want to be helpful and on point. I did write a book called The Pressured Child, and the handout you have is based on my observations about the whole school journey and how to help your child through school, really from kindergarten all the way to the end of senior year. But I've been asked to focus on college admissions, and I'm going to do that. So a number of the things on the handout you have, I'm just not going to get to. Okay? What I need to know is something about the ages of your children. How many of you in this audience have a 17 or 18-year-old? How many of you have a 16 or 15-year-old? Ooh, so 9th and 10th grade parents are out there, yeah. How many of you have a 14 or 13-year-old? How many of you have a 12 or 11-year-old? 10 or 9? 8 and 7? 6 and 5? But you're not here, Brian, because of a 6 or 5-year-old, are you? No. Yeah, he's applied early, yeah, of course, yeah. He's taking an SAT tutoring course, yeah, at 6. Should I go lower than kindergarten? If you say you're lower than kindergarten, I'm going to say, why are you here? Why are you here? So I do have, it's mainly a high school crowd, but I have parents who may be parents of high schoolers, but also middle schoolers and some late elementary school students. So let me address the college issues head on, and then I'd like to talk a little bit about my understanding of the journey through school. In an ordinary year pre-pandemic, I would speak to 10,000 school children a year in assemblies, many about stress and pressure in college. And I would always start with the 9th grade. And I would ask the 9th graders, how many of you have had a conversation with your parents about the importance of getting into a good college. How many of you have had that conversation in the last 2 weeks? So, Liam, you're a 9th grader. Have you had that conversation? Was it partly that conversation that got you dragged here tonight? Yeah, okay, it was. Elsie?
Yeah.
Have you had that conversation about the importance of a good college?
Yes.
See, I have 2 9th graders who really courageously volunteered to let me ask them questions. So we've got 2 9th graders here who've already had that discussion. When I ask 9th graders, they tell me that it's not the conversation in the last 2 weeks prior to my asking. That conversation is repeated often. Sometimes weekly through the 9th grade year, the 10th grade year, the 11th grade year. When I asked 11th graders about it, and I asked, do you learn anything new from that conversation? They universally say no. I say, do you find it annoying? And they say yes. And what do? I try and back my parents off. Because my parents have this bone in their mouths, which is about college, and it's new to me, and it's not what I'm thinking about all the time. Because what students in school are thinking about is getting through this day, this test, this class, getting through the class where you didn't quite finish the homework, and you're just hoping like hell that you're not exposed as not having completed the homework. And do you remember this? All of you went to school? The idea that you're sitting in 10th grade class every day thinking long range is the way your parents are thinking is just totally wrong. It's just completely wrong. As I say, you're trying to survive this day, this class, this scary test by this scary teacher, or this boring class by this not so exciting teacher, right? You're just trying to live day to day, but your parents may be focused on college. I work for the Belmont Hill School, which is a very expensive private school with a very big tuition. And whenever I talk to parents, they describe kind of this rainbow journey that their child is supposed to have at Belmont Hill, ending sort of in a pot of gold, you know? It's a beautiful rainbow and a pot of gold, which is often a college, a letter from a coach in a sport that it's a boys' school, has been playing for many years since he started playing in his town. And the parents have had this long, long view for many years. But I've talked to the boy, and he's described a journey which is kind of day to day and kind of bumpy and not necessarily completely happy. And he's not thinking about college all the time. But his parents have that long view. That kind of discrepancy between the view of students in school and the view of parents is a source of tension and often misunderstanding. So some years ago, I was at an independent school in New York City, and I was talking to the senior class about the stresses in their life. And a junior girl came up to me, and she wanted to talk to me with a lot of intensity. And I knew that because she started to cry almost immediately. And she said she'd been on a college trip. And she visited WashU in St. Louis, Washington University in St. Louis, a superb university. And when she came back, it was quite clear to her father that his daughter had kind of fallen in love with WashU. I've seen that. Kids go out on a trip and they come back and they fall in love with it. But the father, sensing that his daughter was really, really drawn to WashU, very aggressively tried to intervene. And he said to her, if you go to WashU, you won't be with the smart kids. If you go to WashU, your IQ will be lower at the end of 4 years. And then she was crying as she talked to me. And he went on about the fact that the smart people went to other places and they didn't go to WashU. And he clearly wanted to steer her away from WashU. And I said to her, I need to ask you a couple of questions. Where did your father go to college? And what does he do? And she said, he went to Harvard, and he's a Harvard Medical School trained surgeon. And I thought, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. And I said, you know, he's your father and he loves you, but I will tell you my perspective. Your father's a scientist and he should know better. Because this idea that they're not bright kids at WashU is rubbish. And that all the smart kids are, we can guess what the father had in mind, right? That all the smart kids are here and not there is a generational misunderstanding. Because I'm 75 years old. Over the course of my life, college admissions have changed so dramatically. And when I went to an Ivy League school, I was high school class of 1965. The Ivy League in total was taking 60% of its applicants. 60% of its applicants. I mean, I know what my scores were. I could no more get into one of these schools today than fly to the moon. As a woman once said to me, telling me that she'd gone to Duke 4 decades ago, she said, boy, the kids at Duke make me look great. Right? The kids today at Duke make me look great. Because the kind of kids who are going to Duke are a powerhouse group in comparison to the group that she went with. Because college admissions for a place like Harvard or Duke have changed completely. I mean, Harvard now takes 4 out of 100 applicants. It's a global destination. And I know that because I've consulted schools all around the world. I was at Shanghai American School in China some years ago. And I spent a week there talking to students and to parent audiences and speaking from my book, The Pressured Child, because Shanghai American School is the right place to be talking about the pressured child. And everybody's talking Harvard this, Harvard that, Harvard this, Harvard that. And I finally said to one of the college counselors, how many kids from Shanghai American actually go to Harvard every year? And this woman, I didn't mention the size of the school. Shanghai American is 2,700 students. It's a big school. And I said, how many seniors go to Harvard in a given year? She said 2 or 3. And I said, well, where do your kids go in big numbers? I mean, to what U.S. colleges are you sending really very large numbers of your seniors? And she said, we sent 23 to Purdue in engineering last year. And we sent 19 to Carnegie Mellon. And those are our schools with big numbers that our kids get into. And I said, well, why did I spend a week here? Why did I spend a week here and never hear the names Purdue and Carnegie Mellon? And all I heard was Harvard, Harvard, Harvard. And she said, it's China. And everybody talks about what they think is the #1 school because they want their children all to aim at the #1 school. So one final story about this. I was once at a little elementary school independent elementary school in northern New Jersey. I get all of my wacky stories from independent schools. And this one was particularly memorable to me. I was doing a workshop with the faculty on the Tuesday, the day after Labor Day. And the head of school said to me, I can't be in your workshop all afternoon. I have to go see these parents who have been besieging my administrative assistant, saying they have to talk to me first, that first available day in September, so at the beginning of the school year in the Northeast. And he said, I'll see you at dinner. So at dinner I said, what was that about? Why were these parents besieging you? And he said, well, I thought they were members of an extended family that had gone to the school. It was the same name, but it turned out it wasn't. It was coincidence, it was the same name, but it was actually parents who wanted to talk about their daughter's admission for next fall for pre-K. But they had to start with the head of school 12 months in advance, right? And I said, so how'd that go? And he said, well, I asked them why they wanted to send their child to my school, and this is the answer he got from the father. The father said, well, I've done the research. Of all of the independent schools in northern New Jersey, you send the highest percentage of your graduates on to Lawrenceville. And of all high schools in the United States, Lawrenceville sends the highest percentage of its graduates on to Princeton. So that's why we're here. Now you have to understand, the parents were there to talk about admissions for their daughter for pre-K. So these are the parents of a 3-year-old. And the father is talking about college. Now look, I'm not making fun of this father's love for his daughter or his desire to do the best thing for her. He's got a very clear idea about what's the best thing for her. And he's not wrong about the statistics. So you must know something about Lawrenceville, because you're nodding like crazy. Yeah? Why does Lawrenceville have the highest percentage of its graduates going to Princeton of any high school in the United States? Because the father was not wrong, that is true. Location, they're down the street, right? And there are a ton of Princeton professors who send their kids to Lawrenceville. And of course, getting into Princeton is a pure meritocracy, unless of course your parents are totally wired in to the Princeton University community. And Lawrenceville is in that situation. So the problem with the father's aspirations for his 3-year-old to go to Princeton is that we don't know anything about his daughter as a student. You notice I don't say anything about IQ. I've worked in enough schools and seen enough brilliant kids who didn't like school, who didn't thrive in school, who didn't meet their potential as their parents defined it. So, and I'm trained, I know how to give IQ tests, I'm a licensed psychologist, and I certainly have a respect for intelligence. But I also know that the kids who are successful in school have what I call a school brain. The carrots and sticks of school work for them. The rhythm and tempo of school work for them. The kind of awards that they give out and the kind of praise that they give out work for those kids. So what I want to tell you is that by 9th grade, usually at Belmont Hill, we actually know which kids in our 9th grade are going to go to the top elite colleges. We actually know. I mean, it's not a given, but we're pretty damn sure because they have the study habits, they have the ambition, and they have the focus on school. But many, many, many of our boys do not. So how do the conversations about college land on a variety of kids? How does a 9th grader react to always hearing about the importance of college? Liam?
When your parents talk to you about the importance of a good college, what's your understanding of why you have to go to good? Have you gotten the message you have to go to a good college? Yeah. Hold the mic up. So why do you have to go to a good college?
To get a good career.
Get a good career. and that means a good life. And if you don't get into a good college,
I guess you have to work harder. Easier than.
you'd have to work harder to get that good life, because you wouldn't have the advantage that going to a good college would give you.
Yeah.
I mean, you would kind of not have the edge.
Yeah, I guess. Like, maybe not on applications, it would jump out.
Yeah.
So what you have to do is have that name that on your resume when you apply for a job that jumps off at you. Okay. Now, I'm going to ask you a question, Liam, and I'm going to ask Elsie. This is really hard to ask a ninth grader. I usually only throw this question at an 11th grader or 12th. Have I got an 11th or 12th grader? I got an 11th or 12th grader. I hate to do it. Have I got? All right. Liam, you're off the hook for me. Thank you so much. And your name is?
Hannah,
Hannah. Are you an 11th or 12th grader?
12th grader.
Are you into college, Hannah?
Yes.
Are you into your first choice college?
It wasn't my first choice initially, but now it is.
All right, so you've already worked. So Hannah, if I got you in the fall before early, you had early decision?
No.
You
not
didn't?
early.
Not early decision. But let's say before you had gotten anything, I would have asked you the question. I asked this of all 11th graders. I want you to imagine that you get turned down at your first choice college. And while I'm at it, you're rejected at your second choice college. Okay? What is the long-term impact on your life?
In the moment, I would probably be sad and upset.
Of course.
And feel like my future would look a lot different than I had envisioned it to be, but ultimately, there are third, fourth, fifth choices that are likely equally as good of schools that will ultimately give me the same outcome.
How do you know that, Hannah? That's not in your life experience. How did you get to that place of wisdom, as I would think of it?
I guess it would kind of come from myself and what I make of the experience, no matter where I am. I know that I can succeed.
You know that you can be successful, even at college, 5 or 6 on the list.
Yes.
Nice. Nice. So, I went to the school in Cincinnati, and it was all senior year, and I asked my question to the seniors, what happens if you get rejected at your first choice college, and now if you get rejected at your second choice college? And a girl said, I'd be fine. And I said, how do you know that? And she said, I'm applying to 6 colleges. They're all on my top 10 list. And I thought, that's good. That is good, right? I asked the question at Western Academy in Beijing, and 11th grade boy stood up and he said, that would be a psychological injury from which you would never recover. So that's the range. That's the range of the emotional impact of a boy who believes he'd never recover. I was in international school, and the boy wanted to go to a French film school, and he began to cry heavily when I said, what would be the impact on your life if you were rejected? And what I got was that he began to sob. He was a 9th grader. The 9th grader. But he was so gripped by the feeling that his life had to be at this French film school. So I'm a psychologist. I am interested in people's mental health. And I have worked in some of the most academically
elite schools, public, private, and international, in the world. And I've seen kids in the vice of the college search. I've seen kids break down. I've seen families get really nutty. So there's a chapter in my book called College Craziness, in which I summarize all of my experience about it. But I want to go bottom line with you. From the point of view of a psychologist, from the point of view of child development, getting into college isn't about getting into college at all. I asked 11th graders and seniors to think about the whole of the human life cycle, from birth, which we've all had, to death, which we'll all have. What are the 5 major turning points in a life? Universal turning points. And juniors and seniors always say puberty, of course. The biological transition from childhood to the body of a young adult and sexual being, huge universal change. What's next? They say marriage. I point out that not everybody marries. Fewer people are married, but almost everybody falls in love, and most people make a commitment to another human being to share their life with them. And the neuroscientists tell us that's the second greatest reorganizer of the human mental maps, is making that commitment to another person. Then they say, having a child, having a baby. Yes. Yes. The neuroscientists tell us that for all mammals, the biggest reorganizer of the brain is having a child. That is one of the most extraordinary moments in life. Not everybody has children, I understand. It's not completely universal. But now we have puberty, marriage or a commitment, and we have having a child. And then I ask seniors and juniors, anything else? And they say, first job, graduating, and I say, graduating from where? And some kids say college, and I say, is that the biggest moment? Right? Because only 35% of Americans graduate from college. Which in a community like this, can anybody tell me what the college admissions rate are for Newbury High School, Newburyport High School? Does anybody know? Do we have an educated? It's 86% to four-year schools. It's 86%. So it's an overwhelming reality for a student at Newburyport High School is college. That there are some exceptions to it, but it's quite a small minority. So very often kids in a middle and upper middle class community feel that everybody's college bound and everybody's future is attached to education past high school. So when I ask kids, why is graduation from high school such a big deal? And I think it is a big deal. I think it's a huge big deal. But not because you get the diploma. Well, that's nice. That's lovely. Why is it a big deal, graduation from high school? Because for this slice of society, it is the official end of your childhood. It is the official end of your parents' day-to-day parenting for you. For many, many kids in the States who go away to college, it is the end of their living at home. Not in Australia. I was at a boys' school in Adelaide, Australia, and I said, where do your boys go? And the head of school pointed out the window, and he said, Adelaide University. It was right down the street. He said, 96% of our boys go right there. They just go down the street, and many live at home. That's a different, and many in many European countries, kids tend to live at home first 2 years. But the American system is often, you're going far away, and that is the moment you leave home. It was for me. And it wasn't until many years later that I realized that actually after I went off to college, I always had very good, interesting summer jobs. I actually never went home, except as a visitor for 2 weeks at a time, for the rest of my life. That was indeed the end of my life as a child in my home. So if we think about the big turning points in life as puberty, marriage, having a child, right, and leaving home, I got 4. And then I ask high school students to think about something that might happen later. And somebody calls out retirement. And I say, oh yes, I'm all about that. But everybody in my age is either retired or talking about retirement, it's incessant. Anything between having a child, typically before 35 or 40, and retirement, anything you can think of. And a senior, what? Becoming a grandparent. Now that's huge. Now you're talking right to me. I have 3 grandchildren. You want to see pictures? Yeah. My beautiful, beautiful grandchildren. Kids in school are not able to come up with, they sometimes stab around, they say a midlife crisis, they've heard about that, your dad buys a sports car or whatever. And I say, no, I don't think that's universal. And I stand there and I let them think for a minute, and sometimes a senior will say to me, well, like maybe when your kids leave home. And I say, bingo. That is a big deal. If having children is a big deal, having your children grow up and leaving is a big, big deal. Because, and I am the father of 2 and the grandfather of 3, when you see your baby for the first time, you fall in love, so heavily in love, that after that, from that moment, you are completely screwed. Everything is anxiety about this child. And the problem is, from the parent's point of view, is it goes like that. You've got a toddler, boom, and then all of a sudden you have a 17-year-old in your face who is saying, I can't wait to get out of here. And you think, my, that's extremely hurtful. Right? Because I'm not done. And there are tasks in the college process, the parents and their tasks for students. And the tasks for the parents are very clear. It's the loss of this child. She's going away. And back in around 2006, 2007, I was at a girls' school in Cleveland, and a girl was going off to an Ivy League college, clearly a very good student, told me that her father had said to her, sweetie, I'm so proud of you, I'm going to buy you that new iPhone, as long as you put the program on it that allows me to follow you. And she said, no, Dad. I don't want the iPhone under those circumstances. Because she was saying, my departure from home is the beginning of my young adulthood. That is, and what it's about for me is my independence. And if you are tracking me at college all the time, I can't have that independence. Now I know many kids now are quite used to being tracked on their parents' phone. I still have a problem with it with 16, 17, 18-year-olds. That's mine. I mean, we can argue about values. But there's no question that for the parent, the hard thing is to deal with the helplessness of not being the day-to-day parent. not knowing whether your child is going to class, not knowing whether your child is partying, not knowing whether your child is drinking or smoking substances, not knowing whether your child's sleeping or with whom. That's just really hard when you're a parent. And you don't know what your role should be. And I was once at a school in Tennessee, and in January, a mother of a senior who was already into college said to me, Dr. Thompson, tell me, I need to talk about to my son about how often he's going to call home. And I said, actually, that's not a conversation you should be having in January of senior year. And she said, but I need to have it. You know, basically, I need to know that it's going to be settled, that he'll be in touch. And most seniors, first of all, don't know. They don't know how they're going to feel. And they don't know, but they don't want to sign on the dotted line. Because the job for kids is to embark on their young adulthood and become independent, productive, loving, moral young adults. Independent, productive, loving, moral young adults. And when you see it the way I see it, you realize that the name of the college, whether it's Wake Forest or Florida State or Pomona in California or Reed in Oregon or Bates in Maine or some Ivy League name, none of those names can guarantee your child is going to become a loving, moral, independent, productive young adult. That's on her. That's on him. And you won't be there to see it. And as a parent, that raises the questions of, have we done all we should have? Have we steered her in the right course? A senior girl told me in the fall of her senior year, she was coming downstairs, her mother was making breakfast, and her mother said, why are you wearing those socks? Girls in stocking. She didn't have shoes, she was just wearing socks, and her mother said, why are you wearing those socks? And the girl said, Mom, they're just socks. And the mother said, why'd you choose those? And the girl said, Mom, they're just socks. And her mother said, every decision is important. And the senior girl told me she thought, my mom's going crazy. My mom's going crazy. Another senior told me that the fall of her senior year, her father kept referring to her, if we ever see you, if you ever come home. And she was thinking, like, he's talking as if we're having a divorce here or a death. Her father was, of course, full of anticipatory grief about not having his beloved daughter in his house. And he was putting it clumsily into words which suggested how hard it was going to be for him. It's a huge challenge for parents. And there's always a temptation when you're a parent to think that the name of the college will guarantee your child's future. The name of the college will in some way, even though almost nobody puts it in these terms, but you sometimes hear it between the lines, as if it were a grade on parenting, you know. If I get into this college, then if my child gets into this college, then I get a good grade on my parenting. Yeah. So I have dealt with thousands of kids in high school who are going through this process. And what I need for you to know is, at least in the schools where I work, the vast majority of kids go to college, and the vast majority of kids finish college, even though they don't always finish where they started. They don't always finish in 4 years. And if it were up to me to say what would be the greatest thing for boys at Belmont Hill, it would be that they take a gap year before they go. Because so many of the boys at Belmont Hill are kind of academically exhausted by the end of their senior year. And many of them are just going to take our first-rate education and they're going to party it away the first 2 years of college. And I'd really rather have them have a job and maybe get some of the partying out of their system, but in any case, earn a paycheck, be out in the world, and then go back and start in college. Yes, sir, you have a question?
Taking a gap year, how is that looked at by admissions committees?
I think Bill Fitzsimmons at Harvard a decade ago said he would like to see the majority of kids who are admitted to Harvard take a gap year before they came. Because of what they had to do to get in. Because it takes a maniacal focus and just an extraordinary amount of work and lost sleep to get into a place like that. So he wants some people to live. I think, from my understanding, is that college admissions folks are really grateful, really grateful when kids take a gap year, because they get a more mature student, and they get a student who's had some rest and break from academics, so they can come back to it fresh. I've never heard a college person say that they were against a gap year.
And when a child decides to do that, do they do that after they've been admitted or matriculated?
I think many take the gap year after they've gotten in somewhere. Many take it because they didn't get into their first choice and they want to take a crack at their first choice again. But there are some kids who, coming into the senior year, just know that they're not ready for college. There are just many kids, but only a few of them have the courage to say so. I once had a girl at school in New York, and she was sitting with all her senior friends, and she said, "Dr. Thompson, I had talked about colleges leaving home and leaving your parents and the end of your childhood," and she started to cry, and she said, "I'm really not ready to leave home." And I said, "Well, you don't have to." And she said, "But everybody here is going away, right? I don't want to stand out like a sore thumb. I don't want to look like an immature person." But from the point of view of a psychologist, development is not all the same. And there are actually some kids, and I have them at Belmont Hill right now, there's some kids who probably could go away at the end of 10th grade and be just fine. And there's some kids who are really clueless and not ready and not mature enough to be away, even on graduation day from our school. And I would love to see some kids who need it be able to say, "I need more time." But the feeling when you're in school is lockstep, and we have to, as the girl said to me, "But everybody here is going away." Did I answer your question? Please.
How do you kind of encourage them to do gap year? Because that's something that we encourage, but she's like set on something.
Yeah.
They thought-
What? Tell me your name.
Jen.
Jennifer. Jen, what's the reason you think a gap year would be good for her?
So she needs a rest. She's
Yeah.
not out of the pandemic, just take a rest, and, she's lucky that she's, like, where she is right now with a lot of hard work, but I'm like, looky here, like, go travel, we're giving you that opportunity, or take it, like, think of things you would like to, something you'd like to experience, and she's
So,
like, well,
Jen,
everybody's going to school.
Everybody's going to school, that's what she's saying, and of course it's true. There's enormous social pressure, and she thinks, and who will I be with, and who will my friends be, and I won't be on campus, and I won't have a cafeteria to go to, and it does seem structureless and formless and scary. And you have to acknowledge that it's scary, and you have to acknowledge that you're worried about it.
Yeah, I'm not saying she has to go and like get a job, or I'm just saying like go and travel and experience, and then kind of rethink what you want to do. She has all these interests, showing undecided.
Right.
I mean, so it's everyone text that. This I don't want to get personal, but
Yeah, I get it. I went to college because I was supposed to, and I had one major that was totally a wrong fit for me. I had a second major which I found quite boring, and I took a psychology course my fall my senior year in college. And the light went on for the first time in my 4th year in college. I've replayed that in my mind many times. Would it have been possible for me to know earlier than I actually knew? I don't know. If I had taken a year off, would I have found it sooner? I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
So the problem is, we want the right thing for them. The problem is it's future oriented.
You still want to race through it, you know, that's, I think, part of the thing too. It's like, why race through it? There's no rush.
Did you do college in 4 years, Jen?
I didn't go to college.
Ah, so she has an expert non-college mother telling her what her college career should be like. Has she ever questioned your
No.
bona fides on this one?
No, I don't try to, I'm like, this is like, like me getting into a college, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm like,
I get it, but I think all parents imagine a college journey for their child. It's the most natural thing in the world as a parent. But it just doesn't have much to do with the actual lived life on the ground in college. What I want is, if you have a child who is immature and not ready for college, you have to say so. And you have to back it up by not writing a check. If you have a boy, and I've been in a lot of schools where there was a senior boy who was just not engaged academically, was able to, pull the grades to get him through, but where there was no sort of academic curiosity or energy.
She has all that.
Good.
But I don't know.
Tell her, but she's already given you her answer.
Yeah.
Everybody's going, she's going. And I don't know what, I can't add any kind of power to what you've already said, which is, I'd like for you to take a rest. I think there are other things you could do. There are cultures in Australia and New Zealand,
Yeah.
kids, as a matter of cultural expectation.
They do it 13 years.
Yeah, no, they take a year of travel. And I've been all over Asia, and I've run into Australian and Kiwi kids everywhere, and they take a year. And Australian and New Zealand parents are just fine with their kids working as a waitress or waiter in a restaurant at a beach resort like Phuket in Thailand. That they think that's a great experience, because most Australian kids know when they go back to an Australian university they're going to get a job afterwards and they're going to stay, and this is their chance to travel. But that is not the American way. And I think many American seniors don't think of international travel as, there's just sort of no,
Educational. It's very educational.
no, they don't, nobody else is doing it.
Yeah.
It's nobody else is doing it. That's the problem. It helps if the kids in the class above you and the class above you and the class above you all did it. And if you don't know anybody who did it, it takes a lot more courage to do it. Your name, please.
Hi, I'm Maddie.
Yes, Maddie.
I just had to throw this out there.
Sure.
I'm also a psychologist. And
Yes.
a child and adolescent neuropsychologist. So
Yes.
I get these kids, and my job is to help in one way or another.
Yeah.
I just had to
And
share-
You see kids with a little neurodiversity, Maddie?
I do.
Yes.
But I just have to share that my frustration that children are not being encouraged to think about whether college is the right route for them. I recently got a case from out of state, so nobody can know who this family might be, but they're from another state.
Yes.
And it came from the psychiatrist and the parents. Why is this kid depressed? She's
Yeah.
in her first year of college.
Yeah.
Why is she depressed? And I evaluated the child within 15 minutes. I knew the answer.
Yeah.
And this was really two very smart people saying, why is this kid so depressed? Her IQ was below 80.
Yeah.
And those of us who know the numbers know that below 80, you're not going to do that well in
No, you are
college.
not.
So that was the answer.
Yeah.
But that question is costing this family a lot of money.
Yeah.
To me. What's striking me is that nobody picked this up.
Yes.
And this poor kid feels like a failure.
Yes.
So I just have to say that in America, we're not asking those questions as parents and
Right.
educators.
Because the best thing about American education is it's
opportunity for everybody, and second and third chances. The worst thing about American education is it's not very realistic. And that was the answer to the question about why we have too many kids dropping out of college. We're sending some kids who are not really college bound. And, but we don't have enough alternatives. And in a community like this, where 86% of kids are college bound, it's very hard to have a child who is not college bound. In fact, it takes a little courage to stand up and say, I don't think my child's college bound. That used to be more of the norm. But in a well-to-do communities like Newburyport or Belmont or Arlington, where I live, the push for college is constant, absolutely constant. And it takes some courage for a family to stand up and say, not our child. Now, it turns out that 80% of American high school students end up having some kind of post-secondary training or education. So while it's 65% in college, it is actually when kids get into vocational programs or return to community college or train to be an electrician, which is not something most suburban high schools are interested in training you to do, even though we need them all very badly, and they make a very good living. But that's not where our education is pointing. But eventually, after bouncing out of college or failing, some kids do think, wow, if I had that set of skills, I'd be good, and then they go back and get that set of skills because it's relevant, it's focused, and it's incentivized by a good, meaningful job for a kid. Yes,
I
Maddie?
just want to say, when I think about that problem, and the kid I mentioned, and
Yes.
especially what happened tonight, I think that our job as parents is to help our children find out who they are, what
Yes.
their strengths and weaknesses are,
Yes.
and then live a happy life accordingly.
Yes.
And I think, the kid that I just mentioned is deeply unhappy and has been for a very long time.
Yes.
So I think there's a difference between, if we're parents and we say to ourselves, our goal is to raise healthy, resilient
Right.
children, that's very different from saying our goal is to help our child progress
Right.
as far as the American way allows.
Right. So if I were giving my pressured child talk, one of the things I would point out is that at Belmont Hill, we have a problem that we've never been able to solve. And that problem is every year we graduate a senior class where 50% of our boys are in the bottom half of the class. Year after year after year, we graduate a class with 50% of boys in the bottom half of the class. And there's a kind of a delusion. They're well-educated boys, and they've got good study habits, but they were not as academic, or as focused, or as hardworking as the kids in the top 50%. They all go to college. But some ramble around in college and don't succeed initially. Most of them eventually finish. But the kind of denial that I run into in parents, and that the parents of your client must have had, that the school was just not a very good fit for her. And school is not a very good fit for many kids. I believe that school is like a 13-year endurance hike. And you've got to put, I sometimes ask an audience, if you're going to do an endurance hike, what do you need? And people often say, drive, motivation. I give them food, water, and shelter. But drive, motivation, friends, maps, and I say, all good, but what's actually the most important thing? And then a hiker says, shoes that fit, right? And when kids come into school, this is Michael Thompson's clinical estimation. When kids come into school, about a third of them slip on the school shoe, which try as we might with differentiated learning and special education, it's still pretty much a one-size-fits-all shoe. And about a third of kids
just slip on that shoe and it fits perfectly. You see kids in kindergarten, and they're thinking, where has kindergarten been all my life? My God, this is the best thing. We sit in a circle, the teacher reads to us and asks us questions. Sometimes I get to be line leader, and everything works. But I've seen little girls in kindergarten who were already pretty good readers, and they found kindergarten alarming because the boys are loud and disruptive, and they find kindergarten as a school is a kind of an alarming place for them. But they forge ahead. They can always forge ahead. So I've got a third of kids who have almost a guaranteed successful journey in school. I've got about a third of kids where the school boot is going to rub them the wrong way, but they can keep on. And then I've got a third of kids where school drives them into fury and despair. So 30% of ninth grade boys, 30% of ninth grade boys who start high school at New York public schools do not finish. If you were running a business and you lost 30% of your customers, you might regard that as a problem, but that is in fact what happens to boys in an urban public school system like New York. And when I was writing my book, The Pressured Child, I went and interviewed a number of young people, not now kids, 18, 19, 20-year-olds, who were going to a Boston public pilot school, an experimental pilot school called Boston Evening Academy. And it was for people who had bombed out of high school, who were truant or smoking too much weed, or they just dropped out of school in 9th and 10th and 11th grade, and they could come back to Boston Evening Academy at 18, 19, or 20 and finish their high school degree. And I interviewed a lot of them to find out what it was about school that just drove them mad. And you know, one of the answers was Boston Evening Academy. They ran school from 4:30 to 9:30. Does anybody here have a teenager who might like to go to school from 4:30 to 9:30? I mean, I look at the boys at Belmont Hill in a cold chapel in the winter, starting at 8 in the morning, and I look at 462 boys, and I think you should all be in bed. Jeez. I don't know, you shouldn't be listening to the psychologist in a cold chapel in the middle of winter at 8 o'clock in the morning. That's not normal. Not for them, because adolescents don't get their melatonin until late at night. They tend to want to sleep in. Actually, a school that ran from 4:30 to 9:30 would be great for many kids. It's just not great for adults, because that's not how we run our lives. So schools are mostly run on adult schedules, and kids have to adapt. Do you remember that? Do you remember school? Do you remember school? And remember the end of school? 10 minutes to 3, and you were looking at the minute hand of the clock that didn't move. You remember? And you're sitting there and you're thinking, I might scream. I might scream. I'm going crazy. You remember chewing your nails sometimes until they bled, or twizzling your hair? Or in the case of me, I had those blue cloth notebooks, just doodling, looking for any square inch where I could just doodle to keep from going insane. That's the way it felt sometimes. School is hard. School is hard. These are long days, and a lot is asked of you. And no adult could ever go back to school. I mean, adults sometimes say, I'd love to go back to school. You actually mean graduate school, with your first class at 9, and coffee, and then meeting, and then another class at 1 in the afternoon. Tell me your name. Louise, what's your question?
I just wanted to go back a little bit to what Maddie was saying about
Yeah.
our job as parents to raise healthy, resilient, and you're independent, productive,
Independent.
moral, loving.
Yes.
So, as parents,
Yes.
like, what are things that you see as being particularly productive in helping support our children on that path, if that is our goal for them at this time in their lives? Whether that becomes, whether that's college or not, and college is 4 years that are rather valuable, right? All of us are probably, unless we're extremely lucky, looking at a cost that's just astronomical.
Yes.
Right? And so
Staggering.
we want to be chill about it, but yet, what an incredible opportunity.
Yes, it is.
And so, you know, from everything you've seen, what are things that we can't, you know, that we can do that won't make them crazy, but might actually help them?
I'm sorry, I dropped your name there.
Louise.
Louise, thank you. Louise, you're asking absolutely the right question. What should a parent focus on? And I'm not saying the parent shouldn't focus on school. I think you ask your kids to make a meaningful effort and to develop good habits and to lean in and develop some perseverance, because it's frustrating. But also in school, we have to celebrate the things that kids do that are not exactly academic, but which give them hope during the school day. So I have my daughter Joanne's permission to talk about her. She was dyslexic. She never tested anything but moderately to seriously dyslexic. And she's the adopted daughter of 2 psychologists with PhDs, for whom, for Teresa and me, school came like that. And for her, school was a punch in the face, right? Because the elementary school curriculum is 4/5 language-based. And if you have a language-based learning disability, school is going to hurt your feelings every day, if not every class. And our daughter turned out to be a wonderful athlete, something I wasn't and Teresa wasn't. And so these 2 nerdy parents got with it, you know what I mean? And supported her as best we could, without knowing a heck of a lot. But we brought a lot of love and energy to it, and she played 12 seasons of varsity sports. My wife turned to me once and said, I never imagined myself spending this much time in an ice hockey rink at 6 in the morning. But there was Joanna on the ice, absolutely loving it. Absolutely loving it. Playing ice hockey at a very high level. And we scraped it together and sent her to Cushing Academy, which could support her dyslexia and where she could play with other very, very good girl ice hockey players. She played on a team, 2 girls who went on to the Olympics. She wasn't in their league, but she played. You try and find out the kid you got, what his or her talents are, and then you support them as best you can. But you also give kids chores at home, and you have them do meaningful things for their family. This is the productive part, right? Meaningful things. I was once in England, and I was talking about these issues, and a woman came up to me and she said, I work for an American company, but I started up a division of a company in the UK. And I was responsible for tracking who were the successful employers. We hired 500 people in the UK. And she said, I was responsible for not only interviewing them, but tracking their success. And she said, would you like to know something? The name of the college was not predictive of success. What was predictive of success was having a summer job.
It used to be like dinner, a family dinner.
That's right. There's just immense research on the power of the family dinner. Look at the Family Dinner Project run by Dr. Ann Fischel at MGH. Family Dinner Project. Family dinner matters. Family dinner increases a child's vocabulary more than school does. Conversation with adults, meaningful conversation. So family dinner, yes, but summer job. And I've now met a lot of kids, including boys at my school, who are always in summer school, or always at a sports camp or anything, and they graduate and go off to college, and they have never worked for an employer. They have never worked for an employer. And I had a fancy pants upbringing on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, but I also had summer jobs from the age of 14. And I know that some of the most important learning experiences and maturing experiences for me were my summer jobs, particularly 2 summers working with blue-collar guys in Brooklyn who gave me a hard time. They saw right into me and they called me Little Lord. How the hell these blue-collar guys in Brooklyn knew who Little Lord was, I don't know. But they tagged me with that, and I had to earn the respect of blue-collar guys. And I'll tell you, it makes you value work, it makes you value character, it also makes you enormously grateful to have a first-rate education, to work with men who didn't have that. For me, who worked for men who didn't have anything like the opportunities I've had. Did I answer your question, Louise?
Yeah.
Thank you. Please, your name. Linda, yes?
One of the challenges I find as a parent of kids who are sophomores is the school system.
I'm going to give this to you because your voice is quite light, if you don't mind. So your twins who are sophomores.
Yes, and one of the challenges, and it's Newburyport High School does a great job. I mean, it's the system. I don't think it's any one school. But my challenge as a parent and having twins who were very different. That the school, if you do well academically and follow, the subjects that they're pushing, which is STEM, you do okay.
Yes.
But the school doesn't have the capacity to really focus on the strengths of the child. So one child feels they're not doing so well where the other is because academically it just is geared towards.
Let me guess, the girl's doing better academically than the
No.
boy. No, is that right? No.
Actually, I'm going to tell you,
Yeah.
they're both doing feeling well
Right.
in given the situation. But I guess my point being as a parent, and also a parent who's who are dealing with cultural issues like,
Yeah.
like the woman over there said, everybody's going to college, so you've got that whole cultural issue.
Yeah.
And you've got the school who cannot focus on individual child's rights. It's just focused
Which
on.
means you hope your child meets a teacher in school
Yes.
who takes a shine to him or her,
That's right.
understands something about who your kid is,
That's right.
and encourages him or her. So I want everybody, thank you, and I love this. Everybody hold up fingers on one hand of the life-changing teachers you had in high school. Right, Linda? You had no life-changing teacher. Ryan was an educator, right? Technology. But you had what? Who was it? A science teacher? Yeah. Can you tell me?
Yeah, Mr. Avis, I still remember, biology teacher. Some good lessons, had in a couple years, honors biology, AP biology. And
Yeah.
saw not only the science, but just what you can do with it in ways that.
And he ignited
it was a spark.
Nice. Thanks.
I have a question.
Please.
So our daughter is a junior, and she had that epiphany this year in AP history where
Yes.
she loved her teacher. It was
Yes.
one of your hardest course. She was
Yes.
so nervous about it, but she just loved this teacher. So now she wants to go to colleges for international affairs. Like, what does that even mean? Like, she's just like, I don't know, but I know I want to go down with something to do with history, and it's very encouraging for her. But we're looking at schools, and it's hard because where do you begin? Do you start with liberal arts school and tell her to focus on international affairs?
Yes.
Minor in music?
Yes. Did she get into college?
Well, that's just it. We own a wine and cheese shop, and we have folks that come in with Harvard degrees and
Yeah.
degrees from Tufts.
Yeah.
You just need to run the register. But I mean, you could be book smart, you could do really well in high school and get into Ivy League colleges. But if you don't have a mentor or some idea of what's going to make you happy, you just want to be happy. You don't care what you
No,
do.
but a girl's turned on by history. and has an idea that she wants to be she's going to be interested in international relations or international business. I mean, a liberal arts school with that kind of orientation, there are lots of them.
So, of course, the cost and competition and all that stress, we like to avoid all that. So right now, we're like,
You're trying to avoid the cost, I get that.
Yeah,
There's no avoiding the competition.
yeah, I know, but I just feel like if you just get, I don't know if it really matters in the schools we're getting at. I think there's so much hype and,
No, I just said Tufts because I live in Arlington, I live right across from the Tufts Boathouse. And Tufts famous for Fletcher.
but don't you feel like all schools have something magical and great about them, and it's just finding that right mentor and teacher at that school?
Once your daughter's on the ground in a school, yes, you're quite
So
right.
it's just teacher kids.
Because you
it's
could go to a
resourceful.
school that had a fancy school of international politics or whatever and not meet the professor or not. But the problem is, and did I get your name?
It's Angela.
Angela. The problem is, none of that's known. And it's in her hand. And you can go round and round about it. But in the end, the only thing you have to say to her is, we can afford this and we can't afford that. And if it's UMass, make the best of it. If it's a university, if it's UMass Lowell, make the best of it. 5 good people, but that's on you, sweetie, because at a distance, you can't direct anyone.
Yeah, we definitely, encourage her. It's all about resources and hitting the ground running and,
Right.
independence.
Yeah.
So I'm just listening to getting into best schools, and we're just.
Yeah, even I get tripped up by the fact that I work at Belmont Hill. This is the kind of schools we talked about. But even that is a distortion and a delusion. I was once at a very fancy girls' school in New York, and I asked the senior class. These girls had been in a K through 12 all-girls school, academically very tough. I asked them, how many colleges as a group are you applying for? This was in the fall of their senior year. And the girl raised her hand, and in all sincerity said, 35. And I said, what? You're killing each other. 35? Are you joking? And the college counselor was sitting in the room, and she said, the number is 92. So why did these very smart girls think they were only applying to 35 colleges, when in fact the college counselor knew they were applying to 92? What's the answer to that?
They didn't want to share if it wasn't prestigious.
Exactly. They didn't want to talk about any school that wasn't on the list of the top 35. Although many were going to go to one of the 92, because not everybody gets into those 35, right? I mean, like, duh. At Belmont Hill, about a third of our boys get into those 35 colleges. And the rest go to someplace that's a really good fit for them, and they do very well. And some of the wiser boys that I've talked to at Belmont Hill know it early on. And they say, my parents are thinking I'm going here, but I'm not. I'm going here. I try not to talk to them too much about it, because it'll break their hearts. And I don't want to fight with them. But I know I'm going to be fine. I've just had a ton of boys say that to me. But I was at a boys' school in Dallas once, and the father stood up to ask a question at the end of my talk. He said, Dr. Thompson, I'm a physician and I have a question. That is a very bad start, I just want to tell you. And I said, yes. And he said, how do I motivate my son? And I said, motivate your son to do what? And he said, to get A's. And I said, well, in what grade is your son? He said, 10th grade. I said in front of 200 people, what's your son getting for grades now? And he said, B's. And I said, what did he get last year in 9th grade? And he said, B's. And I said, what did he get in 8th and 7th? And he said, B's. And I hesitated because I knew I was going to pick this guy off. But I said, your son is a B student. He said, I know that. I know that. How do I motivate him? And
And I said, I have been in education more than 35 years, and I have never seen a parent find the secret key and insert it into the back of a 15-and-a-half-year-old and turn a B student into an A student. I've sometimes seen competitive friends get a boy to raise his game. I have sometimes seen an inspiring teacher tap into a boy's passion and get him, but most of the time, if he's a solid B student by the end of 10th grade, that's what he's gonna be, and that's where he's gonna go. It's a student for whom he's gonna go to the college who thinks they're the right match for that solid B student. That is just the way it is. And I actually trust both in child development and in the college admissions process to make a match most of the time. Well, I don't want to pin you down. We've been at this for 90 minutes. Did you get two more questions? Is this not what you came for? Yeah. Tell me if you, yeah, please. This is what you came for?
I'm so grateful to you for sharing your stories, and your most recent story is bringing up something for me that I think about a lot with my two boys. Here's my question for you. Do you have any tips and tricks for us as parents for helping us create that bridge to our children, for helping them trust us and seeing their authentic selves? Like, how do we create that bridge with them?
Okay. Tell me your name. Lisa. Lisa, did I lose Elsie? I did. No, you're there. No, she's gone, right?
You can take her friend.
What?
You can take Elsie's friend.
But she's not volunteered. Lisa's question. I have an answer to that, but I would like a student to say, what's the best? So Lisa, I would put it, what's the best approach that a parent can have to let their child know that the parent is seeing them for who they are on the journey that's the right journey for them? Liam, you want to take it?
I guess,
You want to take a stab at it? Here you go.
Maybe just, I don't know, like in their hobbies.
So you want a parent to kind of focus on the thing you love, and if they focus on that, they're seeing the true you.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what if they look at you and think he's all about Fortnite?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know.
So is it always that a boy has to have a serious thing that his parents focus on, or can it be, I was ironic there, I was a little even sarcastic, but can parents see the future you do you play the game?
No.
You don't, all right, so that was it's a wrong, barking up the wrong tree. Do parents see in whatever the hobbies you have, do they see the best of you?
Yeah.
That's who you are.
I mean, it's not like who I am, I mean, it's a part of it.
Yeah, but maybe the best part of you, huh?
Yeah.
Yep, thank you, Liam. Do you want to take this?
No, it's okay.
It's okay? All right, that's a very gentle no. It's okay. So look, my answer to the question is this. And I write about this at the end of Raising Cain, in the last chapter. I said, my co-author, Dan Kinlan, was a professor at Harvard School of Public Health, and he was a researcher. He said, you write the advice chapter, Michael. You're the one who's always giving advice. You write the advice chapter. So I did write eight suggestions for how to raise a boy and make him feel understood and respected. And I said, you need to ask a boy as use him as a consultant on his own life. Okay? If you ask a boy, I sense you don't like Mr. Anderson, your math teacher, as much as you liked Mr. Bailey last year. Is that true? There's actually only one person on earth who can answer that question. And that's your son, right? And you're asking him about his lived experience and what he's making of it. So I want lots of questions about how you do in school, how do you deal with the stress of school, and what are you doing with thoughts of college? I think those conversations are so much more productive than saying, oh my God, we ought to do a college trip in the next 6 months, don't you think? Right? Because all the kid does is think, oh Jesus, what a nightmare. I'm going on a college trip with my parent who's anxious about college. And she's ahead of me, he's ahead of me, right? And I want you to always ask, where are you now in your thinking? Well, I'm a psychologist, that's actually not a surprise. But I learned so much from the boys at Belmont Hill by asking them straightforward questions. Are you planning to be an A student? I was just talking about how boys tell me, I know where I'm going to be at Belmont Hill. Thank you, Dr. Thompson. This is where I'm going to be. And I think, well, that gives me peace of mind. And it gives me something to say to your parents who have no peace of mind about where you are. But you have peace of mind, and you've given me peace of mind because you've told me what you're going to do. I think the most important question to ask an adolescent is, what are you thinking about and what are you planning to do? Right? Does that speak to you, Lisa? That is the note.
It's hard to say that though with a judgmental tone.
What?
It's hard to say that sometimes though, they take it like you're judging.
What are you thinking of doing, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's not the way you do it.
No, you have to ask it exactly right, Jen. You have to say, what are you planning? What are you thinking of doing? Which is why an objective psychologist it's often easier for me to ask the question than for a parent, because I am not gripped by parental anxiety, except I was totally with my own children.
Yeah.
Completely mad with love and worry and anxiety. Does that make me any different? How many people in here had children and they made you crazy? Hey, thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you everyone for coming. If we can just have another big round for Dr. Thompson.